In 1974, Detroit Diesel built an engine so powerful, so massive, that most trucks simply couldn't handle it. The 12V92, a V12 two-stroke diesel, 18 liters, up to 1,150 horsepower in some configurations. The military loved it. Put it in tanks, landing craft, generators, anything that needed serious power in brutal conditions. Commercial ships loved it. Tugboats, fishing vessels, luxury yachts. The 12V92 became the gold standard for marine applications. But on the highway, in over-the-road trucks, it was basically banned. Not by law, not by the EPA, but by physics, economics, and common sense. This is the story of an engine that was too much of everything. Too much power, too much weight, too much fuel consumption, too much engine for its own good. And it all started in 1938 with a simpler engine that changed everything. 1938, the birth of Detroit Diesel. Let's rewind for a second. Before we talk about the 12V92, we need to understand where it came from. In 1938, General Motors established the Detroit Diesel division, and in the same year, launched the Series 71 engine. The name 71 refers to the displacement of each cylinder, which is 71 cubic inches. Now, what made Detroit Diesel different was the two-stroke design. Most diesels are four-stroke, but Detroit went with two-stroke. Why? Because you get a power stroke every revolution instead of every other revolution. That means more power in a smaller, lighter package. The trade-off? These things screamed, literally. That's why truckers called them Screamin' Jimmies. And they leaked oil, hence the other nickname, green leakers. Detroit painted them in that iconic alpine green color. But they worked, and they worked everywhere. 1940s, World War II proves the concept. Here's where Detroit Diesel really made its name. During World War II, the military needed reliable diesel engines for tanks, landing craft, trucks, and generators. They needed engines that soldiers could fix in the field with basic tools. They needed power in the worst conditions imaginable. Detroit Diesel delivered. In 1941, they built 9,000 Series 71 engines. By 1944, 62,000 engines per year. At peak production, engines were rolling off the assembly line at about 6,000 per month. These engines powered the D-Day invasion. They powered supply trucks across Europe. They powered everything the Allies needed to win. And after the war, all those soldiers came home knowing one thing: Detroit diesel engines were damn near indestructible. That reputation carried over to civilian applications. Fishing boats, tugboats, buses, fire trucks, construction equipment. By the 1950s and 60s, if you needed reliable power, you bought a Detroit diesel. 1960s to 1970s, the rise of the V12 now. Detroit Diesel made their Series 71 engines in all kinds of configurations. Inline 4s, inline 6s, V6s, V8s, and yes, V12s. The 12V71. 12 cylinders in a V configuration. Each cylinder displacing 71 cubic inches. Total displacement, 852 cubic inches, about 14 liters. In its most powerful form, it made around 475 horsepower. For the late 1960s and early 1970s, that was massive. The 12V71 was the most powerful engine you could get in an over-the-road truck, period. Some truckers loved them. In mountainous areas like British Columbia, where you needed serious grunt to haul loads over steep passes, a few operators ran 12V71s in their big rigs. But here's the thing. They were rare, really rare, and there was a reason for that. 1973 to 1974. Everything changes. Two things happened in the early 1970s that changed the game forever. First, the 1973 oil crisis. Fuel prices skyrocketed. Suddenly, fuel economy mattered more than raw power. A lot more. Second, the 55 miles per hour national speed limit. Before this, truckers could run 70, 75, even 80 miles per hour in some states. But after 1974, 55, by law. The 12V71, entire reason for existing. High speed, high power hauling, vanished overnight. And then, Detroit diesel introduced something new. 1974. The 12V92 arrives. In 1974, Detroit diesel launched the Series 92 family. Bigger bore, same stroke. Each cylinder now displaced 92 cubic inches instead of 71. This meant more power from fewer cylinders. A 6V92 made as much power as an 8V71. An 8V92 made more power than the 12V71. And then there was the 12V92, 12 cylinders, 92 cubic inches each. Total displacement, 1,104 cubic inches, 18.1 liters. Depending on configuration, it made anywhere from 625 to 1,150 horsepower. Let me put that in perspective. In the 1970s, a typical highway truck engine made maybe 250 to 350 horsepower. 12V92 made double that, sometimes triple. It was an absolute monster. 1974 to 1980s. Where the 12V92 thrived. So if this engine was so powerful, why wasn't it in every truck on the road? Because it wasn't designed for trucks. Not really. The 12V92 found its home in 3 places. 1. Marine applications, tugboats, fishing vessels, commercial cargo ships, luxury yachts. The 12V92 became legendary in the marine world. Why? Because on a boat, weight doesn't matter as much. Fuel economy is important, sure, but power and reliability matter more. And the 12V92 delivered both. Turbocharged and intercooled versions made over 1,000 horsepower. That's insane for a diesel engine in the 1970s and 80s. Even today, decades after production stopped, you'll still find 12V92 powering boats around the world. Operators love them because they're simple, fixable, and damn near bulletproof. 2. Military applications. The US military used the 12V92 in tanks, amphibious vehicles, generators, and heavy equipment. Why? Same reason they loved the 71 series: simplicity and durability. A soldier with basic tools could work on these engines in the field. And in military applications, you don't care about fuel economy. You care about completing the mission. 3. Stationary power generation. Big generator sets, industrial plants, remote mining operations. The 12V92, perfect for these applications because it could run continuously at high load for years. Maintenance was straightforward. Parts were everywhere. But notice what's missing from that list. Highway trucks. The problem: too much for the road. Here's why the 12V92 never worked in over-the-road trucking. Problem number 1. Weight. The 12V92 weighs approximately 4,560 pounds. Just the engine. Dry weight without accessories. That's over 2 tons of engine. In the 1970s and 80s, that weight was a killer. Every pound of engine was a pound less of payload. And trucking companies live and die by payload capacity. Problem number 2. Size. The 12V92 is physically enormous. To fit one in a truck, you'd need to stretch the frame, move the cab back, redesign the whole front end. Some custom builders tried. There are a few Peterbilts and Kenworths out there with the 12V92, but they required so much modification that it wasn't practical for production trucks. One trucker I read about said his 12V92 powered truck could barely fit the engine under the hood. The thing was so long, it pushed the cab back several inches. Problem number 3. Fuel consumption. 2-stroke diesels are thirsty. Really thirsty. The 12V92 had notoriously poor fuel economy. For a boat or a generator, that's manageable. But for an over-the-road truck trying to make money, it's a death sentence. One former operator said his 12V71, the smaller V12, could get him an extra trip between Vancouver and Calgary every month because of the power, but the extra fuel costs nearly canceled out the profit. The 12V92 would have been even worse. Problem number 4. Power you couldn't use. Here's the brutal irony. All that power, you couldn't actually use it on the highway. Remember the 55 miles per hour speed limit? You don't need 1,000 horsepower to cruise at 55 miles per hour. You need maybe 300 to 350 horsepower. Tops. All that extra power just turned into heat and noise and wasted fuel. And even if you wanted to use the power, say climbing a steep mountain pass, the transmissions couldn't handle it. The clutches couldn't handle it. The drivetrain would break before the engine even broke a sweat. The truckers learned this the hard way with the 12V71. More power didn't mean more profit. It meant more broken parts. Problem number 5. The 8V92 existed. And here's the final nail in the coffin. The 8V92, with 8 cylinders instead of 12, made 360 to 435 horsepower. That was plenty for highway trucks. More than enough, actually. It weighed less, burned less fuel, fit in standard truck frames without modification. So why would any trucking company spend extra money on a 12-volt 92 when an 8-volt 92 did the job better? They wouldn't. 1980s to 1990s, the end of the road. The 12V92 continued in marine and industrial applications through the 1980s and into the 1990s. But on highways, it never happened. Not in any significant way. By the mid-1990s, 4-stroke diesels were taking over. Engines like the Detroit Diesel Series 60, the Cummins N14, and the Caterpillar 3406E offered better fuel economy, lower emissions, and enough power for modern trucking. In 1995, Detroit Diesel stopped producing the Series 92 entirely. The era of the 2-stroke Detroit was over. Why it failed on the highway? Let's be clear, the 12V92 wasn't a bad engine. It was an incredible engine. Powerful, reliable, fixable. Marine operators still swear by them. The military trusted them with their lives, but it was the wrong engine for over-the-road trucks. Too heavy, too big, too thirsty, too much power that couldn't be used. It's like trying to put a dragster engine in a delivery van. Sure, it's impressive, but it doesn't make sense. The 12V92 was built for applications where power and reliability mattered more than weight and fuel economy. Boats, generators, military vehicles. On the highway, weight and fuel economy are everything. Power is secondary, and that's why you never saw fleets of trucks running 12V92s. It wasn't that they were banned by any law or regulation. They were restricted by reality. Physics, economics, common sense. The civilian trucking industry simply couldn't handle an engine that powerful. The legacy. Today, the 12V92 lives on in the marine world. Walk down any commercial dock, and you'll still hear that distinctive 2-stroke scream. Fishermen, tugboat operators, even some luxury yacht owners who refuse to give up that iconic sound. Parts are still available. Rebuilds are still common. These engines were built to last, and many have logged hundreds of thousands of hours. But you won't see one in a highway truck. Ever. Because sometimes, too much power is exactly that. Too much. The 12V92 was the Vi-12 that was too much engine for the road. And in the end, that's exactly why it never belonged there. The 12V92 teaches us something important about engineering. More isn't always better. Sometimes the best engine isn't the most powerful one. It's the one that fits the application. For boats and generators and tanks, the 12V92 was perfect. It still is. But for trucks, the 8V92 was better. The Series 60 was better. Engines with less power but better efficiency and practicality. The 12V92 wasn't killed by regulations or emissions or politics. It was restricted by its own nature. Too heavy, too big, too powerful for civilian use. The military could handle it. The marine industry loved it. But truckers, they needed something more practical. And in the world of over-the-road trucking, practical beats powerful every single time. The 12V92 was an incredible machine, just not for the highway.